Mixing with Mike, mixing tip. How to pull a vocal forward in a mix. Now, in working with a vocal, one of the things that you'll quite often want to do, or an effect that you want to capture, is to bring the vocal forward in the mix. And so what that means is that you want it to stand out or come forward, pull itself in front of or on top of the mix. And so if the song is sort of appropriate for it, what this type of effect can do is it can actually take a vocal and make it more present, allowing you to kind of almost do anything you want with it, and the music sort of resides or sits behind it. And it's not a very difficult thing to do. So one of the most common ways that this type of effect is used is what I would call like a static chorus effect, or sometimes I call it a spread effect. And this used to be done very well with a device called the an AMS DMX, which was a digital delay unit. And it also had pitch and sampling built into it. A very expensive one, really high-end one. And the basic idea is you would have a short delay time. You would have a slight amount of pitch shift on either side. And initially this was set up as a processor as a way of like what I would call a static chorusing effect. So in this case, I have no modulation whatsoever, but that pitch shift and the subtle delay creates a sort of spreading characteristic. And the idea was it would take a vocal before, pitch correction became like a big thing or a doable thing. It would actually smooth out the pitch by having a little bit sharp and a little bit flat on either side. But it also had this amazing effect of pulling something forward in the mix. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, and I'm going to show you how this basic effect works. So here I'm just using the doubler. So in lieu of having that or an H3000, which is another device which had a very similar effect that was just like this built into it, what we have is two delays, and the delay times generally, for me, generally start somewhere around the 10 millisecond area or so. And so you could start this, they're slightly offset from each other. The idea here is that if they're slightly varied from each other, then you're not getting the exact same thing with just pitch on either side. So we want to create a little bit more variation between the two sides. In this case, within the plugin, these two things are panned hard left and hard right, and the direct signal is taken out. So this is done in a send-return kind of fashion. So what I've done here is I've set up a female vocal here, and we'll cue up to the verse. And so what ends up happening here is, just for the sake of just kind of pulling some of this stuff together, maybe I'll just kind of give the vocal sound a little bit of some processing for what I've had from another thing here. So let's just see if this kind of works. And let's just... So this is the dry vocal. Just going to bring up the gain here at the output bus so we can hear. Bring this up on the other side. And this is the effect here. The moon is brand new, dirt into bread, lucky few, lucky few, lucky few. So it sounds like we have some other effects that are kind of bleeding in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of kill these other effects here that sound like they might be coming in pre-fader for some reason, or maybe bleeding in unexpectedly. So I'm just going to kind of mute these guys out here, and let's just... There we go. Shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat. So with the delay time this short, you could hear how it has a little bit more of a chorusy kind of effect, although you don't get really the phasey kind of movement. As I increase the delay time, however, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hatch. You'll hear how the vocal comes forward towards you. So in other words, if I start with a low setting, if I bring this down to, in this case, this plugin has a limit of around 7 milliseconds. If I start there, it's kind of phasey. And what you do is if you just sort of listen to the stereo blend, what you'll hear is a little bit more phasey, but it will be kind of stuck in the middle of the speakers. As I increase the delay time, though, you'll hear the dry vocals sort of coming forward and spreading. And this is kind of the idea of the effect. The wine
wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands.
And this has the effect of sort of like a slight slap type of thing, which adds a depth perspective to it. And quite often, what also helps with this effect is to apply filters to it. So if I were to do something here, just in terms of like a quick EQ, would be to just take and filter off a little bit of the low end, filter off a little bit of the high end here, so I have a little bit more of a mid-range kind of characteristic.
Soon it shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch.
And that helps to open up the depth or the spacing, because if those delays at whatever timing are kind of filtered down a little bit, then what you'll get is they'll sound a little bit more distant, because that would happen if something was reflecting off a surface. And if we have a delay time like we had here, somewhere in the 20s, then that would be basically a surface that would be more or less approximately about 14, 15 feet away, or for those metric people, somewhere in the 4 to 5 meter range, somewhere in that range. And that's how far away those walls would be. And so that's how long it would take for that delay to kind of come back. And so we can increase this and kind of make it a little bit longer if we wanted to.
Pass, the wine in your glass,
At some point, we cross over to a place where it starts to be a bit more audible and starts to have a musical effect. And so this is the range, and it's different with every song based on the tempo, but it usually happens somewhere in this area.
The wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands. Eat or be fed, the moon.
And then we mix in just enough to get the effect that you're looking for. So this is kind of a cool way of just pulling something forward. And I'm just going to take it in and out just in the mix here, just so you can kind of take this out here. So you can hear the effect that it has there on the dry vocal and placing it in, and how it creates a little bit more of that pulling forward, or that separation effect. I kind of call this like a triangulation or a triangle kind of effect, where it's a very simple thing, especially if you have a dense production in the middle of it. Having those simple delays, like a simple sort of slap left and right with slightly varied timings, can really help. Another way to kind of go about this is if you don't want this type of processing, you can actually just go with a simple stereo delay here. And so what I'll do here is I just opened up a multi-mono version here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go with like a pull down my feedback, go with like a 64th note timing. So this is going to bring me somewhere, in this case, around 30 milliseconds or so. I can filter right from here, which is kind of cool. So I can take this type of thing here, make it a little bit lo-fi, and now I can, I'm going to separate the sides out. So if I do a similar type of thing, there's going to be no modulation, but no pitch either. So what I'll do is I'll raise this level on one side here. Let's see if I believe I can type this in. Yes, okay. So I'll just make this slightly varied. So if I make it 32 on one side, I'll make it 28 on the other side. So we'll just kind of get like a slight variation here.
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands. Eat or be fed, The moon is brand new.
So because there's no pitch here, you get a little bit more of a natural kind of characteristic, and this may be more appropriate. So with the pitch, it does still create a little slight phasey, and it might be more appropriate for a song if you want a little bit of a spacier kind of thing. But the end effect is that it brings something forward, or maybe a better word to do it is to create separation between what's going on in the mix. So it depending upon, these are two basic approaches to kind of pulling out a vocal from a track, and then it gives you the ability to sort of process it whatever way that you want. So if I want to filter it a little bit more, I want it to be warmer, I want it to be richer, I can do that, and that separated space that's created by that sort of triangulation with the delays off to the hard left and right doesn't create any interference with what's going on in the middle in the mix, and actually creates a sort of unique space that works for the vocal. So anyway, that's a mixing tip for this week, for this episode, how to pull a vocal forward or separate it in a mix.